Hey, it's Jamie from thedailyinfusion.com, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Vito Mucci, who is a shaman and the author of Coffee for Consciousness 101, the application of perspective to reality. And I've been following him on Facebook for a while, and yeah, I love all things emotional processing, and this guy is a master at teaching these perspectives. And so I'm just really happy to have him here to talk a little bit more about his book and what he does. And I'm going to hand it over to you now, Vito, to just talk a little bit more about how this came to be and your background, which is really interesting as well.
Oh, thank you. I have kind of a one of a kind background, and I'm very lucky to have had it. I was raised by a therapist who was very 60s ish, and her brother and little sister, my aunt and uncle, were he's a doctor and medicine man. My aunt's a channel, and so I was kind of raised around. I don't want to just call it free thinking, but more scientific envelope pushing um, kind of support my whole life. And I started delving into psychology and myth in fifth grade. I got mono, and it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I was just sick on the couch for like months watching Joseph Campbell and John Bradshaw, who's a family systems therapist. And what really sunk into me with John Bradshaw was that just the way that a family organized itself, you could predict people's behavior from it. And so I learned a lot about how emotional motivators work through families and through people. And I didn't think about it much because conversation at the lunch table in middle school isn't so psychologically driven yet. Who knows? Maybe they'll be doing consciousness in a few years. If I have my way, they will. But I grew up, and my brother had many bouts with cancer, and so I was kind of face to face with death, like more times than you want to be. And I had opportunities when I was young to kind of step into a different role consciously. Like, am I going to be there for my mother and help everybody out, or am I going to be a kid? And having that conversation consciously when I was 14 and 15, when he was going back in for more and more surgeries, it was a very powerful reality to observe, because I knew observing was this huge thing, and I didn't know why. Like, I assumed everybody watched the way they move through the world, but I was watching myself choose. Okay, am I going to be parental here, or am I going to be a kid here? Can I slide back and forth? And I really found that I kind of could. Like, I could still play and be silly as, while parenting people through situations, excuse me. And so that was another big jumping point. And that's also when I got more attuned into shamanism, because shamanism there are a lot of schools that you can go to for it, and there are a lot of practices, but in general, it's really about connecting to source energy, allowing intuition to flow through you, and taking what reality gives you and helping organize it into a more loving reality. And so I was kind of raised with that. And, it's not something I do for a job. It's just kind of something I am. Like, if I was raised on a farm or a ranch, I know how to handle, raising vegetables and handling cows. Doesn't mean I'm a farmer. I'm not a farmer right now. I mean, I'm not a shaman for money. I'm a writer. But that was what I was raised with, and it gave me a lot of play with perspective. So I'm going to see things from my point of view, and I'll see things from somebody else's point of view, and my mom's point of view, and my brother's. And that was what I was raised with, was to just jump back and forth through all these different points of view, so much so that I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was normal. And I ended up going to college, and I was a musician, and we did an album, and that was awesome and really vitally alive time for me. And then I kind of ran out of things to do. And that was when my bipolar 2 disorder kicked in, which is like regular bipolar, but super reactive, and there's no continuity between like high energy and good mood. which is usually bipolar 1, high energy, good mood, manic, happy, depressed, down. I can be depressed and manic simultaneously, which is no fun.
Oh, wow.
That's a really dangerous place to be. So I did a lot of drinking, and so for about 6 or 7 years, I was fighting drinking, PTSD from experiences with my brother, and bipolar, all of those things mixing together into this cocktail of just being buried all the time. And it took me probably 6 years to even start to climb out of that. And then after I did start climbing out of it, I started realizing that everything within me was something I had to form a relationship with. So I have this super reactivity to fear, sadness, anger in myself and in others, and I can't get away from it. And that was what the PTSD really banked on. It banked on me being trapped and not being able to. I was just the victim of my and everybody else's emotion, no matter what anybody was doing anywhere. It was an attack on me, which it's just the way it was. I didn't want to keep going like that, really. I didn't think it wasn't going to work out too well, so I had to start finding ways of cutting down whatever was coming in to hurt me, whether it was getting rid of toxic people or making sure I wasn't watching too much violent TV or loud music. I started to really manage my environment, and then I realized it's not just the environment out here I have to manage. I have to manage the environment in here. And that's when the idea of processing emotion just started coming to me. And I didn't even fully develop it until actually after I finished the book. Like, there are 5 sections in the book where I discuss step by step how to process grief, or how to process frustration, or how to process just rehabbing from the horror of being alive in a chaotic world we can't control. And I do that for each one of them, but they were all separate. I didn't put it all together until actually I was done with the book. But I think that's good, because the specific steps are better as you go from chapter to chapter. But if there's one huge thing, it's processing emotion, and that's the one thing as a species we don't have it down. We can't do it. You can walk through a grocery store and there will be 10 emotional outbursts. Yeah. Guaranteed, like negative tone, passive aggressive, like I can tell what everybody's feeling, and all of that's motivating their behavior. No one's doing anything about it. So that's where I go.
You know, what's really interesting is I think about my time in social work school, which was one of the things that they did for us in one of the classes that they suggested we give to clients was a worksheet of just a bunch of faces and facial expressions and the corresponding emotion to that. And I was thinking to myself, you know, what's so interesting is they're teaching us to do this with clients as therapists, but why isn't this taught in schools when we're, you know, like just starting this? Like,
right.
Why do we have to even get to the point where we don't know what sadness is, or we don't know how to identify what the energy we hold within us is? But I mean, it is a brilliant tool. Like, it might seem really simplistic or whatever, but we actually don't know how to connect to those things because we aren't taught. And then we kind of assimilate into this, like, we take on the beliefs from other people and conditioning and whatever society tells us. And so there gets a point where we each have to come to the conclusion that, all right, not only do we have to identify these things for ourselves, but we have to, like, unlearn all that other crap that we took on. So, yeah, it's interesting that you already had that perspective. I feel like I knew I had that same kind of ability where it was like I could see all those perspectives, but I forced myself into the conditioning.
Well, and we're habituated to ignore it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like, we look around and we see how everybody's doing. We're like, no, those people are fine. I'm like, no, they're not.
I know.
They're not fine. Like, they're not fine. None of them. Like, I'm looking at my parents. Well, they're not like, they're kind of happy, like, here and there. Like, they're not happy. They're not fine. They're not okay.
Right.
This isn't where they wanted to be. Like, how many people you look around during the day and they're like, oh, I'm totally excited to be here. Like, driving in, like, traffic. Not too many.
No, and it's all that, like, reserve and suppression that we have been containing within us, and then eventually a lot of us have to get hit over the head with a point where it's like trauma after trauma to wake us up to that, which it sounds like, you know, you went through your period of that as well.
Right. And I don't think we have to go through that. I mean, honestly, life is pretty hard, and we're all pretty sensitive beings. If we keep our hearts open even a little bit, a lot of things are going to hurt. We're going to have the opportunity to, you know, open our hearts to pain and learn. without having to go through horrific trauma.
Right, right. And that's, I think, where we're coming to this kind of point where we're going to have the ability to completely turn this around so we don't have to get to that point anymore. It's because of perspectives that you're offering. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about those patterns that you see coming up when we have that reactivity, that process that we all kind of fall into this trap of not necessarily identifying the emotions that are arising, and then we have a thought and a story that we create, that we attach to it, that perpetuates this
Yeah,
emotional, discord. So can you talk a little bit more about what you share with regards to that?
absolutely. We have natural cycle stimulation within our mind. Our mind is, it's interesting. I was thinking about this today, just a little like thing for Twitter. We're the only species on the planet that is not symbiotic with our own brain. Like,
Yes.
our brain's not necessarily on our side.
Mm-mm.
It has its own self-justifying means, and a lot of people call it the ego, but it's just more complex than that. In that the ego serves good and negative purposes, and the brain, no matter where you're at, can always wants to self-justify. So, if we have an emotion, let's say, and emotions are natural and they're non-negotiable, they're not controllable. You can influence them over time, and that's where our power lies. But in this moment, if I get angry, I can't just say, "Nope, I'm not angry." That would be the same as trying to go to sleep while you're jogging.
Mm-hmm.
It's your heart rate says, "No, you can't go to sleep until the heart rate's lower, and we have to release serotonin." Like, what are you thinking? So the idea that, first of all, we need to observe the way our body behaves, to even get access to the mechanisms that are taking place. So, for instance, if I get frightened or upset, and I start having an anger or panic reaction, my brain, it's like, okay, we're having this reaction, but we don't know where it comes from. So we better find a reason really fast. That is in the book, I call that mental instinct,
Mm-hmm.
because it's trying to justify what's going on in the body. It hasn't de-identified from the emotion. It says I'm angry instead of I'm experiencing a moment of anger. And so it has to justify it instead of saying, hey, wait, whoa, whoa, you're just having anger because a guy cut you off in traffic. There's no reason to start bringing money and the future of the world into this,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I want to do. Oh, I'm angry. I hate, terrorists. I hate this. I hate, you can point it to anything. I can get political really fast. And the ability for us to find an open door to start bringing up all this emotional garbage that our brain is like, oh, I got all this good stuff in here. You've been angry forever about this, 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 and this. This guy cut you off, so now it's time to really just unload and start thinking about everything. And so my brain will cherry pick information that justifies exactly the emotion that I'm having. So I'm angry. Now I'm going to think about unfairness in the world, the school systems, college. I'm going to think about things in my life that angered me. I'm going to think about things in my kids' life that bother them. And as those come up, those are going to create more anger reactions. So we have one reaction, it gets justified, and then the justification creates a whole nother set of reactions.
Mm-hmm.
If we observe, we can stop the justification and just deal with the one emotion and process it.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge thing. If any violent person were to do that one thing, the violence would basically be over. They may not be able
Right.
to control it forever, but I know I'm a rageaholic. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but I have serious rage issues,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to use that on me.
And it's really the violence that we perpetuate against ourselves through our own judgment. I mean, because if we don't judge, if we have unconditional acceptance for all of those feelings without labeling them as I shouldn't be feeling this or it's a right or
Right.
wrong emotion, that's what creates the need to justify it that,
All that friction. Yeah.
there's just so much discord. And if we just allow ourselves to just kind of neutrally observe, like you discussed, it just becomes energy in your body that you're just
Right.
assimilating. You're letting it flow, no different than happiness.
Well, yeah, the moment I get angry, it's like, oh my God. Now, now it's just a feeling. It's undirected and it's flowing. And when we were setting up for this, she hasn't mentioned it yet.
Yeah.
I had technical difficulties, and I'm driving from one house to another trying to get things, ready, and I'm having to do this. So I'm having, oh my God, you didn't set up in time. You didn't get the stuff ready. You didn't make sure it worked. You don't have everything you need. And I'm just beating myself up hard all the way home. And by the time I get home, I'm like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I have to give an interview. I have to be like, this isn't going to help. And I'm like, I'm doing like Lamaze breathing. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have the feeling. I'm furious. And that's okay. And then I just let it pass. And it takes, it usually doesn't take longer than 30, 40 seconds if you allow it. And it's short, but it feels like a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, especially within the spiritual community, that people think that they have their stuff together if they have to be, but that's where it's even more repressed, because it's like we're not allowed to have those moments, and we're still human beings. We are still human beings needing to integrate that divinity within our being, and that means you're still going to feel emotions, you're still going to get triggered, you're still going to feel these intense energies.
That's right.
And to learn how to coexist and co-create with them and use your environment. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that, how everything is this co-creative effort between us and our thoughts, us with each other, and using that energy in the most productive way without judgment of it.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so one of my favorite chapters in the book, and I know it gets, I know people kind of read like through it and past it because no one's really mentioned it, but I think it's Ubuntu quote, if you want to go fast, travel alone. Mm-hmm. If you want to go far, travel together. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote. But what I do is, like, when we're dealing with the emotional body, the emotional intelligence of the body, these are instincts and heart and sensory translations from every aspect of our being, from our flesh to our organs, everything. These are the things that help every single animal in the world survive their entire lives. And these are alive within us, and we've learned to kind of tune them out over years of trying to control things, and that's okay. We needed whatever. We were survivalists. We lived in caves 100,000 years ago. There were tigers that could eat us. It's okay. But the way I see it is that the human heart and the emotions are like a horse, and we're going to have to live our entire lives with this horse. And that's the scary thing, because it's bigger than us, we can't control it, and it's kind of got its own agenda. But we can train it, and we can work with it, and the truth is, we can't go farther, we can't build more, and we can't be more powerful than if we're on that horse. Mm-hmm. The horse of our emotions that, when I feel love, when I fell in love with Claudia, there was nothing I couldn't do. And today there's still nothing I can't do. There's nothing I can't overcome. And that's what having an open heart does. It is not just empowering, it is fueling and focusing. And when I get angry, that's like, hey, something's wrong here. It's a red flag. Okay, I'm going to take my horse is like skittish. Okay, well, I'm going to pay attention to my surroundings now. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm not careful and I walk into a bed of snakes, this horse is going to throw me and I'm going to land in the bed of snakes. Yeah. And that's really, I love those analogies. Like, because at a certain point, whether we tell the horse to go or not, it's going to do what it's going to do. And so we have to have a really good relationship with the animal inside of us.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what true love is. I think when people refer to things like unconditional love and all those things, to me, love is just that state of being where you are in unconditional acceptance and allowance of your experience, of your physical experience. And that includes all the triggers that come our way. It includes every person that crosses our path. It includes every thought that goes through our mind, and understanding the computers that we really are, that we can take that experience and be like, okay, wait, but I could program it this way to interpret it in a way that's not going to completely derail me, where I have to disconnect from this reality and go insane. Or it's just that being in that place of acceptance, really, and allowance that this is what it's going to be. Allow yourself to be that container. Let it come in you, contain it, and
absolutely
assimilate it into your being. It's all part of the experience of being alive and being a human, is incorporating this stuff.
That's absolutely the perfect thing, because it describes the natural movement from observer consciousness, which is, I'm talking to you, but I'm also watching me talk to you, and I'm managing, everything else that's going on in my body. I'm paying attention to whether I'm hungry or not, or, whether I'm cold, which I'm starting to get because I'm outside.
Hmm.
But it's watching all of that, and it's, allowing me to talk and giving me energy to converse. And this state, this observer, naturally turns into a conductor, which is what you were just talking about.
Hmm.
It naturally starts saying, oh, well, if I'm observing this probably isn't the right thing for right now. I remember more of this. I've seen a different mood. I'm just gonna go grab that perspective. I'm gonna bring it back and I'm gonna mix it in and see what happens. And for me as an addict, oh my goodness, there was no more powerful thing in the world, because if you could imagine each person who was like falling off the wagon, like that first drink, if they could feel all over their body how they felt after they woke up from their last hangover, no one's taking that drink.
Oh, yeah. I worked in addiction for a while. I actually ran support groups and I did a lot of group therapy between
Mm-hmm.
people of all walks of life. I mean, you had the Wall Street brokers with the homeless people, and you had all of this different kinds of things. And but it all boiled down to the same thing, which is processing emotion, which is
Can't get out of the moment. They're
it's
stuck and it's fixed and
I noticed in addiction and in these groups, it was just the immense fear of getting in touch with the sensations in their body that they used the drug for, that they were trying to avoid that feeling of whatever the energy was within their body. That's what they used it for. It was so overwhelming. The fear of feeling that was just like too much to bear.
it's energy. It's not the mind. It's not up here. And this was something I think is. I was living with my mom when I was an addict,
Hmm.
and she was a therapist, and so we were like two professionals going at how do we manage this. And it took me 5 years to explain that it's not in my head. It's not a mood. It's not a thought. I'm having a physical reaction, and it feels like I'm being torn apart, and I can't bear it. And understanding that it was physical and that emotions are physical and need to be allowed to flow through the body was such a huge breakthrough in my treatment of myself and my self treatment.
Hmm. Yeah. And
And
I
also so my mom could understand me because she didn't get it.
Right. And sometimes going through that physical process, like for me, I got very ill physically and I was in bed for a few years and I would start to have seizures. And what I noticed, I would have this observation of the moment when these seizures would get triggered. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it would just be an emotional, like I had a really strong energy going on. And then I started talking about the story in my head, like, oh no, I don't want to have a seizure. No, no, no. And then boom, before I know it, my body is convulsing. But it's literally just doing me the favor of trying to release this energy for me.
Right.
I couldn't contain it anymore. It needed to be seized out of me,
That's
literally.
exactly right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to notice how it's all a physical experience for this reason. We need to allow that physical experience to occur so that we
Yeah,
can come back together with ourselves and interact in a way that is harmonious with everything.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to note how bad the energy wants to get out. And that's such a powerful thing. For me, I drank and just released it. And like, because I didn't know how to release it just with my body yet.
Right.
And it took me years to figure it out because there was no, I'd work out, I'd do this, and it didn't get it done. And everybody has their own ways, and everybody has their own needs as far as getting rid of it. But if you can start the processing early enough. Hi, Ari. I'm on the radio right now. It's okay.
Hello, Ari.
Um, he's processing emotion right now. So the idea is that when we integrate the emotion as it comes, when we're in observer consciousness, aware enough to watch an emotion come through, we can stop all of that extra. The first thing we want to do is reject it, like, and that's so violent because it's like your kid walking up to you. It's like your inner child walking up to you. I'm upset by this pop. Like, no, we don't want to do that. That rejection of self. As soon as we can start, okay, we're just gonna, okay, yes, what do you have to say? I don't agree with that. No, the mailman is not bad, but that's okay. Like, we have time to do that. We can do that, and observing lets it happen.
And that's part of the whole reparenting ourselves, because it becomes really necessary, because as most of us grow up, we don't feel safe to feel our feelings, because when we're relating with others, it seems like most people are just, it's a subtle manipulation of trying to get your needs met. And these
Right.
interactions are what happen. And our parents don't always consciously realize they're doing that when we're growing up, or whoever our caregivers are. But if our mood is not convenient, if that emotion that's arising within them is not convenient to their day, they're going to reject you as much as possible. And that
Right.
becomes our responsibility from that point to kind of soothe ourselves. But we don't know how to do that because no one's
Nope.
taught us.
Well,
And
it's not
so,
trained. These are the biggest things, and they're not trained.
no. And so, like,
Every addiction, violent act, most mental disorders, most, this is either the cause or a huge sticking point within it.
and so let's talk a little bit about to the people who are just like, well, how do I go back? Like, I don't know what to do and how to do this now. Like, how do I undo this? And what would be your suggestion in terms of people who are in that place that want to make that shift?
If you're in a spot where you start understanding that you're overwhelmed by emotional realities, um, the first thing to really do is get into observer consciousness and get comfortable with just the movement of getting from this fixed, like, I'm Vito at a table talking, to I'm Vito talking, but I'm also Vito watching. That movement, that perspective shift is like the initial self-awareness. Like, I don't even know if we can do it before, we're 12 or 13, because our brains haven't fully formed yet. But as soon as we're capable of stepping back and looking at ourselves, that's just an action we want to start doing throughout the day. And, I learned in meditation when I was young that it was possible, and I got good at doing it when I was a little bit older. But 13, 14, I started getting good at it, to the point where I realized, well, being able to pull out and observe is kind of the point of meditation. I don't need to be sitting still to do it. So I'd start doing it like playing baseball games. I'd do it during wrestling matches. I'd do it, in the school, and I'd be able to pull out of where I was and create this extra space within myself. And just doing it, first of all, calmed me down and made everything around me more manageable, because I was watching me having emotions. And it's kind of, when we identify with an emotion we have, it's much more violent. When it's like, I'm angry, it's much more frustrating, much more debilitating. And, paralysis is not the thing we want. That ends up paralysis leads to repression, leads to acting out violently. It's a matter of time before we hurt somebody we care about.
That is my issue with therapy and traditional analysis, which is that observation is great, and to have awareness of that is great, but the analysis and picking apart, that's the judgment piece that comes in and
Yeah.
paralyzes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I mean, I think I've been doing therapy with, friends and strangers for probably almost 20 years now, and our mind wants to justify and find a cause. Like, oh, I'm this way because of this. I'm like, so you're always going to be that way? Because this is in the past. You can't change that. Like, that's always going to be there. But that's not it. That's our brain trying to find a way to control our emotions, and that is impossible. It's not possible. Some of us can manage our emotions better than others. I'm certainly not one that manages mine very well. And I have super reactivity. And if I'm so good at managing myself, I'm so good at managing myself, but in comparison to the average person, I'm still relatively disabled. I'm not fully functioning as a person when it comes to being able to handle things that I don't want to be a part of. I can have a panic attack in 2 seconds over anything. And then I go, okay, I got to take 10 minutes. I'm done for 10 minutes. Like, great. But that's the amount of attention we need to be able to give ourselves. And, just observing, starting from moving through our day, like, because we don't feel spiritual when we're in the grocery store, when we're in the car, but I can guarantee everybody goes to the grocery store, and pretty much everybody either drives or rides in a car. And the emotions that we feel in those places when we're people watching, or when we're, dealing with clerks and cashiers, just random people throughout the day. When I come up to a grocery grocery checkout girl, I have like 30 seconds of panic. Like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? I wonder if she's going to see this. Oh, look at her. I wonder how she feels today. Oh, well, she's feeling like this. And I'm reading her energy and I'm starting to spaz. I'm like, whoa, whoa. What are you doing? Like, I start observing myself. I'm like, seriously? Like, why don't you pull it together, dude? And, you have a card, you have cash, you're going to bag the groceries. So it's going to be okay. You know what? You've done this before. You're going to be all right.
Right.
And, that's the being able to pull out and observe, and everybody can do it. Everybody can do it. And at any point you pull out and go, oh, look, I'm looking at this. All you have to do is take a breath and validate it. A breath with validation changes everything.
Just giving ourselves permission to feel, to be feeling beings on this planet. We don't have the permission to do that. We're kind of educated out of that, out of our feelings, that it's not polite, and because it makes people uncomfortable. But once we realize that people are only uncomfortable to the extent they haven't processed their own emotions, that's it. And then we don't
That's
take it
it.
personally anymore. But other than that, we're taking it personally when somebody else can't handle that. Like, oh, don't cry. Don't cry. Oh, I don't want to make them upset. It's like, why? Why do we care? Why do we care? Why are we going to repress ourselves because somebody else is uncomfortable with this?
Yeah.
That's their journey, not ours.
Hmm.
Why are we making it ours?
Yeah, we don't need to. There's a lot of stuff that we don't need to take on, and it's just the habit of not processing emotion to the point of ignoring the fact that it exists. It's cultural safety to keep ourselves from cognitive dissonance and discomfort, but we don't have anything else to do right now. Like, our lives are a lot easier and they're a lot better than they have been. We're not fighting for survival anymore. This is kind of this is the evolution of consciousness, being able to integrate the emotional reality of our body. And really, that's the only way to fully enjoy life. It really is. And pushing that away is nonsensical at this point.
And allowing it is loving ourselves. That's what loving ourselves mean. When people are confused with how do I love myself, that's it. That allowance right there and processing.
Allowance, and even looking forward to it. That's
Yes.
I found that when I first started getting into, I'm going to integrate emotions, I'm going to learn to manage them, and I still had this idea that as emotions would come, I would slowly squash them out of the picture. Oh yeah, okay, so we're going to get rid of fear, we're going to get rid of anger, we're going to get rid of sadness, we're just going to squash those in the corner. I'm going to relate to them, and then they're going to listen to me. And that's not very kind, and it doesn't work so well. And so it changed from that to, let's see, I'm excited. So now that I've been doing therapy and spiritual journeying for a long time, I have more and more and more emotions every day. Just tons everywhere, out of control. And that's what I want. They're never going to be managed. I mean, they're never going to be stifled. There's always going to be a lot of them, and I'm always going to try to relate to every one of them.
Yeah, they're like flavors, like spices, and like the more
Right.
you're just tasting different flavors, and they have different textures, and some of them look different. They have different colors. It's just variety. We're just integrating them into our experience as the norm instead of being told that it's not okay we're supposed to be only this flavor and that flavor, and anything else is scary. We don't want that. It doesn't
Right.
taste good to us. But it's like,
Well, it's like choosing between your children.
yes,
It's ridiculous.
it is. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance and how when we are in an emotionally reactive state, this is like where manipulation and beliefs and all these things can get entrenched into us. And let's talk about how this all starts and why we go down this path, and then why it can be so hard when those beliefs are confronted to really integrate a new perspective and a new flavor and bring that in.
Um, in general, when we're dealing with cognitive dissonance, what happens is we have an emotion that we can't process. Usually this is early in childhood. We learn to do this. Like, if mommy and daddy are fighting, that is deep fear, because those are the safety things. So they can't be fighting. So we're just going to, no, they were doing a play. They were doing a play. That's all that was going on. And we're safe, and that's fine, because the foundation of our being is built on safety. And if we don't feel safe because we're scared, our brain can't go on. It can't veto if that's happening. And so we start making up a story. And whenever anything threatens that story, like when our friends say, why are your parents fighting? my parents don't fight. Like, just going to come right back at that because it's so all of the stories that get built up around this, they start becoming a hindrance to us, and either they become anger or they become one way or another. This is a rejection of the self. There's a rejection of the experience, and that creates resentment. So now you have a pile of fear, and now you have a pile of resentment. So you're scared and you're angry and there's tension being built up. And the way that leads to manipulation and, conflict is that what people who are trying to help us are trying to do, we're trying to get you to uncover those. Like, hey, we're going to let some of this tension out and we're going to try to get it. Hey, it's okay that mom and dad were fighting. You're still safe. How do we convince somebody of that? That's really difficult, but we're going to convince them, hey, they're fighting, but you're still safe. There's no reason to resent them or feel resentment for yourself about all this emotional stuff. And we can slowly start taking away at it. But you have to make somebody feel safe. And that's the thing that I don't think we really get in the community is that, when you try to help somebody that's an addict or who's suicidal or depressed, and they have these things that you need to make them feel safe first. You need to somehow convince a human being that is having serious fear issues that it's safe to be open. And, therapists focus on this in sessions, and in general, they don't focus on the processing of emotions. So they uncover this stuff and they don't teach the person how to process it. Like, hey, this is the focus. We're going to get at this shame. We're going to feel it. And then we're going to let it go. We're not going to keep re-justifying it. We're not going to point at it as the cause of everything that's ever gone wrong in our lives. We're just going to say, hey, this is here. We're going to dig it up and we're going to just consciously dismiss it.
And that's taking responsibility for yourself.
So, oftentimes in a therapeutics, I'm going to tie this in, I swear, in a therapeutic environment, they will find this spot and they'll just keep tapping it okay, well, we're going to release some more shame. This is what's causing everything. And that puts the focus here. You can't see, but I'm doing that on the table. It puts the focus here, away from the person's experience now. And that doesn't work so well, but it does keep a conversation going on that forever, ad nauseum, which is not necessarily what we want. The way people who are looking to manipulate us, whether it's narcissists who just want our energy, or whether it's people who need things from us because we're more capable at something, coworkers get us to do their projects with them and then use all our labor, or whether it's people who want to channel violence or channel, aggression or channel focus. So like all commercials are going to tap those, like especially my favorite is male, like Viagra and stuff like that. Like, how, like, no, like, oh, I'm afraid of that happening. I'm totally going to listen. What happens is all of that energy and tension, they can funnel it in a direction. So we're going to take all of this energy you have, and we're going to give you Viagra. We're going to give you Coca-Cola. We're going to give you, we're going to give you an answer, but the answer is just a place to release this energy, and that's the connection that's made between the person and the thing. So if we're looking at someone who's in a domestic abuse relationship, the partner who is receiving the abuse and the person who is giving it has made a connection between an action and the release of tension. That's why it doesn't matter, if a battered woman is acting on her best behavior. They always are. It doesn't have to do with her. It has to do with his inability to manage his anger and his need to punish so that he can get the tension out. That's what he needs. And so when people are aggressive or violent, in general, they are looking for any avenue where they can release this anger. And that's how we get manipulated really easy, whether it's by people who want to get in a fight with us, or whether it's people who want to use our energy for something. They find the places where we are not willing to process emotion, and they tap those buttons. And anyone who's been around, anyone who's ever said, oh, that person really presses my buttons, that person is tapping your cognitive dissonance to get a response, an energetic emotional response. And from the smallest level, just between two people passing each other on the street, to the crusades in the Middle Ages, that's the level that you can have. You can send entire wars and convince millions of people to attack each other, or you can just, kind of kick off energy on a random stranger, like on the street. But it's the same system.
Yeah, and this is why I remember when I was in class studying to become a therapist, they would really put an emphasis on trying to make social change and changing policies on the macro level. And I would
Right.
always say, they really encouraged us to go down that path. But I'm like, no, 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 the individual. Like, if you could get the individual to really understand these things about themselves, that, oh, hey, like what we call a narcissist, for instance, where this is somebody who's actually unwilling to feel their own emotions and gets some kind of pleasure out of seeing you feel it for them, right?
Right.
And so it's like, well, if you can get that person to actually be okay with feeling that, then they might not go on to just go and commit whatever they're going to commit from that point forward, or any kind of
Absolutely.
violent crime that comes from that same root, that same foundation. So it's like, no, no, no. It actually seems like the individuals are actually very, very important to making this grand scale change.
Violent stuff are committed by individuals.
Yes.
Anything violent, they're the ones who are doing it. If you stop the individual, you don't
Bingo.
stop a group. That doesn't happen. A group's made up of a million individuals. A group is just a label for 20 individuals. We're going to stop it on the group level. No, group's just a name for 20 individuals. Like, it's just a shorter term. It's like saying a few instead of three. It's not accurate. It's not a thing. A group isn't a thing. A group is 20 individuals.
Yep, bingo. And I really love what you said too about the way that therapists are addressing this, where you provide the safe environment. And of course, we know that holding space is so important, but yet it's that constant sitting in the dirty bath water that doesn't help us release
Doesn't help.
anything, because that's also where I find it to be very judgmental, where the person starts feeling like, all right, this isn't going away. And then they judge themselves for that they're still stuck in it. And
Well, you force them to identify with the cause as if they can't, like, as if it is permanently the determining factor in their existence. And it's not. We have a new now every moment. And no matter what, that thing, like, I will always have my history, but the way that I relate to it and whether or not it dominates my behavioral matrix, whether it is dominating my motivation or not, that can change really fast. And we do that by focusing on the present, not on the past.
And then when it comes to the diagnoses, which is something that I wanted to discuss with you, because you and I are no strangers to diagnoses. I've had a host of medical ones and also dealing with my own emotional issues. But I think that we had an exchange online once about the fact that we can use those not to attach to the diagnosis as our story and who we are, but as a means of connecting to allow someone to feel that safety, that, yeah, we have these labels and these diagnoses that help kind of categorize these behaviors and to get us having a better understanding and a wider perspective, but then not to detach from it, but to use it in the correct way. And like, can you talk about how you use those labels, that you received throughout your life, these diagnoses?
Perfect. I can do this with
Yeah.
with bipolar too. It's my favorite
Right.
because it is a diagnosis of how my body reacts to the world around it. So everything that happens to my body happens super loud, super fast, and is very difficult, if not impossible, to control or manage. Now, when I was first bipolar, my doctor said something. The first guy who diagnosed me by bipolar, he gave me an idea, and the thing is, that idea, I still use it. And it's really just an amazingly powerful tool, but I didn't continue therapy with him because I moved. So I didn't get bipolar therapy from him anymore, and no one else really taught me wrong after that. So the initial thing he said was, look over all of the mistakes that you've made the last 5 or 6 years. And he said, apply this to it. You were overly affected. Every decision you made that was hopeful, you overestimated your abilities. No, you cannot live on 3 hours sleep. You cannot go full-time to college, full-time job, and have a full-time band and do all three of them well. You can't. I told myself I could, but that was just the bipolar reactivity responding from the manic state, with a manic state that didn't think it ever needed to sleep. It's inaccurate. And so I took that, I'm like, oh, so I can take this and I can apply it to something, but I don't necessarily have to be it. And so I carried that. And bipolar is one of the things that I'm not actually medicated for. So my reactivity is still off the charts. So when I get panicked in a relatively regular situation, like not knowing where to put the dishes, like, oh my God, the cupboard's full. Where am I going to put these dishes? That's happened. That's real. That's a real response I had. I can say, whoa, that sounds like a manic bipolar person there. You wanna validate him, or do you want to step out and remove his ability to dominate?
Mm.
And bipolar Vito is one of the many little Vitos I have. He's an emotional reaction, and he's an emotional reaction that's a state of being emotional reaction. I can have him. He can be the lead dog here for 12 hours at least.
Right.
But if I observe and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm manic today. I'm gonna. I'm not a manic person. I'm not a manic Vito. I have manic qualities that are right here next to me that I'm going to be aware of, and I'm going to adjust for. I call that adjustment consciousness and that's, I think, what you're talking about when it comes to a diagnosis. Whenever we get a diagnosis, that is just something that we have to adjust for. That is something that happened to us, that is not us, it happened to us, that we have to adjust for. If I lost my leg, the diagnosis would be, you don't have a left leg, you're going to need crutches. And I would be like, okay, so I'm just going to use this tool now. And the fact that I don't have a left leg is not going to be who I am. I'm still going to walk. I'm just going to walk without a left leg.
And we regulate that from the inside out, not necessarily from the outside. And I think we have a tendency, yes, we have to acknowledge the physical experience, but there's this balance where we put all that focus on that Viagra pill, on that pill for the answer of it. But really, when you can get in touch and learn how to modulate and adjust for these things internally, you can manage every area of your life, and you can have an understanding of where your individual perspective is coming from. These labels, these diagnoses, and these judgments are just our individual way of handling and processing. And
Right.
it doesn't necessarily mean that we're bad people, we're awful, we're crazy, that there's like something really, really wrong with us. It's just how we're experiencing. This is how I experience the world. This is how you experience the
Right.
world. Why are we saying like we take it so personally and that it's such just we're a terrible person or something?
Well, I think the main thing is that it's a diagnosis. It's not damage.
Hmm.
It's not an acceptance that we are damaged things.
Yes.
And, the way that my brain takes things in has made me really emotionally aware and powerful. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's an opportunity. And I think all of the diagnoses that we get are like that. There are opportunities, not per se to overcome, because that's a little bit cliche-ish, but there are opportunities to find new ways to relate to reality internally and externally. And, the world internally, being able to observe that and understand that it has its own, it's like the world, like there are birds flying around out here, and that's theoretically outside of me. And theoretically, I think the fact that my stomach is digesting food, that's me though. No, it's not. It's my stomach outside of my consciousness that is digesting food with or without my permission.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole system within ourselves that is powerful when realized, and the humility that we can have before all of those processes can make our life really rich. And that's what I want, is this just rich, gooey experience internally, and and then when we get that, spilling out externally and through our ability to connect to the world around us.
Right. And the more we allow ourselves to connect to all those experiences, that's the degree to which we'll feel alive. Because otherwise, if we disconnect from any part of our being, any part of our emotional experience, that's when we feel numb and tuned out to the world, and that's when we feel lost. That's when we start feeling like depressed, and those feelings take over because we don't feel alive, because we're not alive. We're not connecting to our experience in the most authentic way and the most
Right.
profound way we possibly can. Why not view it as like, wow, this is a really rich emotional life that I'm leading. I get to experience all these sensations all the time.
Yeah. It's being audience to your own movie. Like my movie has had some my movie's had some really bad moments. Man, the lead character just ate it again. Wow, that was a bad. Oh my God, I don't even know if I like the lead character right now. What did he just do? But it's always been like, whoa.
Hmm.
And that's the kind of life we want because, and I cover this in the book too. Like, we're not just living our lives, we're watching it.
Hmm.
And man, if my life had, if I want my life to be a little bit more like a football game than a baseball game. And
Mm.
that's just, that's no no bad blood against baseball fans. And you know, okay, I love football, but I mean really the power of a deep, rich, emotional reality that's tumultuous. It's like being able to be at sea in a storm all the time and have that excitement and being able to integrate all of those different parts and steer the ship through the waves like majestically, like it just makes us Poseidon instead of a victim on the ocean. It's a huge difference.
Oh, totally. And then that does become that balance that we seek. It's not necessarily like we're going off the rails all the time from here to here. It's like we're so conscious of it in the moment that we're able to integrate back to balance very quickly. And then it becomes this seamless journey where it's just this cool ride you're on.
Yeah,
And
and that perspective, that feeling. And I can't remember, I remember the first times I felt it when I was young, and I remember getting back to feeling it again. I think I was 15 or 16, and I had it until I was probably 20 or 21. And then I kind of got overwhelmed by everything. But then when I was 29, I got it back, and I'm like, oh, I get to keep this now. Like I know how to make this work, and like I know it's not guaranteed, and it's not certain that I'm gonna be able to do it every day. I know it's not, but I know what it feels like when I'm taking the emotion and I'm seeing it as an opportunity every time. Like, oh, this is rich. Like, let me take this direction. This is an opportunity for me to do this. How can I make this situation awesome?
yeah.
And being aware on that level and observing my reality as all of these different things happen has made me feel confident and strong, and it helps me deal with my kids. It helps me deal with the people I love. And you know thank God for that.
Yes.
Thank God for having that perspective where that allows me to connect to things inside myself so that I can connect to things outside myself. Because if I can't connect in here, if I'm furious and I can't connect to that, I'm going to be sitting here fighting this, and everybody's going to be out here like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm just going to be nothing. Like, but I can't connect to them if I'm doing this.
Right. That's how we have
Uh,
tolerance for others. Otherwise, like if we don't connect to those places inside of us, we will not tolerate that behavior in another. And
no,
then,
we don't.
boom, you're not having an authentic connection with anyone and you can't connect with the world around you. And so
I'm
it's
depressed, alone, and angry. That's
right. It's we are afraid that we're stuck in the act two of the movie where all the conflict is, where the character hasn't won the day yet and whatnot, and not realizing that there's always another opportunity. We haven't seen it yet, though. We just haven't seen that part of the movie yet.
right.
And if we just allow ourselves to be in that act two, where this is the story right now. This is what it is right now. Okay, so like live it.
Yeah.
Like
This is there's no what was who was it, Rilke, I think,
mhm,
who said you live your way into the answers. Like,
mhm,
we have a lot of questions and we live our way into the answers, and that's it's important not to rush or have expectations about where we should be. Like, I'm not where I should be. I'm 30. How old am I? 37. I'm
mhm.
36. I'm 36. That's how old I am. But I'm less than half life over, and I've only been conscious since I was 15. So I'm like 21 years old in consciousness years, and I got 40 more at least.
Mm.
Like, I'm not even a third of my conscious life is over right now. I'm just getting warmed up. I mean, I started trying and really being alive at 30. The idea that we're washed up, or we should be someplace that we have an expectation that it should be different than it is,
Mhm.
it's just crippling and unnecessary and inaccurate.
It's only when we get attached to the way the mind thinks things should be that we suffer. And and that's society's script. That's the programming that's not our personality. That's made up of other people's beliefs and conditioning.
Absolutely.
And so like once we kind of realize that and recognize that, like, wait a minute, that's not actually me.
Right, that's
And
built off of collective cognitive dissonance.
yes.
That's built off of collective fear.
So we disconnect from that, get together with ourselves, connect with ourselves. We see that, oh, wait, I have a very good internal compass here in the form of my feelings. And that is how our soul speaks to us to guide us. So we don't have to worry about what the future should or shouldn't be and avoiding all that, because we know we're okay in this now moment. We've accepted everything. We've come together with ourselves. And we never want to lose that connection once we discover that. And
Right.
so it's just the ultimate power. But I think we should probably wrap up just because I know that I could probably go on with you forever. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
But if
Thank
you
you very
had
much,
any,
and likewise, it's been awesome, and
yeah,
it's been
like
such a battle.
I know,
It's been a total battle interview. It's awesome.
I know, but this was great, and I just wanted to like if you had anything you want to leave the viewers with of what would be your key piece of advice on how to deal with the overwhelming energy that is around all of us right now that we're all tapping into. If you have the ability to feel, what would be your word of advice to them?
You know, if are we talking about right now with the terrorist stuff specifically, or
yeah,
change friction from fear and stuff like that?
which is all the same thing, really.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
For me, and I would probably pontificate about this a little bit differently at a different time of the year. But right now, the thing for me is I am really, really aware of every single anger impulse that I have. And so all through the day, the observer consciousness that I, keep going, and I've said it in other places, but, it's hard to keep that up all day. But I can task it specifically for things. So like right now I have like its sensor turned to anger because I am consistently getting frustrated and I'm getting furious about things. And so I am tasking just on that, and I'm busy all day. And so when things are when they have a lot of friction, we're going into an election year, that's guaranteed to cause friction. So really, I'm watching my want to express anger and have power, and watching that in other people. So I'm watching the anger impulse in myself, and I'm watching the anger impulse in other people. And man, it makes me really super aware right now because I'm seeing it all day. So it's really calming that in myself and being able to manage that. I feel a lot safer because I'm seeing everybody else's anger, and the less I can manage or relate to mine, the more uncomfortable I feel. So in order for me to feel more comfortable right now, I'm definitely watching my anger, and that allows me to deal with everybody way better, just by watching myself and allowing it and accepting it and moving through it.
And it's kind of contradictory to how the mind tells us to like walk into that, but that is where the true power lies. And it's the irony that the mind's trying to control and have the power all the time, but it's like, no, the real power is in the release of that.
Yeah. Like, no, I'm going to walk at the monster.
Yeah.
What? How are you? What? Like, yes.
Give it a great big hug.
Yeah, absolutely. Embracing it is that's when you realize no matter what it does to you, it can't kill you. It's just anger.
Mm-hmm,
no reason to be afraid of it.
Just energy. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just so, so grateful for you and everything you do. And please, where can people find you, and where can they find your book and everything? Because I'm going to put links.
The book, Coffee for Consciousness 101, The Application of Perspective to Reality, is on Amazon. There are a bunch of great reviews there. It has a page on Facebook where I post a lot of graphics and quotes, and just being on that page, if you don't have money for the book or don't want to read a 550-page textbook, which I totally understand, just going there and seeing the graphics and engaging the information that's just on the page is just a great idea for everybody. And I think you can share a lot of just a little tidbits of information. And if you want to do the book, I I can't say enough good things about it. I'm still reading it. I still go back and read my own book because it's relevant to me in a new way each time I read it. I think I'm on like the sixth time going through it.
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
Amazon, we also have an ebook, and it's really about processing emotion and being able to manage emotional realities and form relationships internally. That's what we like.
Yes, and when we fall in love with ourselves, we fall in love with the world.
Oh,
So
yeah, that.
just
That.
people, we can really change the world this way through our own acknowledgement.
It can happen really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Like, really fast.
And it is happening. And so I just want to leave on that note that amazing times are happening right
I'm seeing
now.
it.
I'm seeing it
Absolutely.
too. It's real. It's real, people. So there is so much excitement right now and no reason to be going into fear whatsoever. And if we
Mm-mm.
do feel it, to just acknowledge it and understand
Yep.
and like go back to that observer mode.
Right.
It really does work. But thank you so much.
Thank you.